Good morning and welcome back to our study in the book of Genesis. I know on behalf of the elders and Mark who are teaching the class, we're just having a blast going through this class and really enjoying it. And I'm so excited about the different things that we're learning, even as we review narratives, stories that we've probably heard for many, many years. God's Word is so incredibly powerful that we can continue to learn new lessons. And this week, we jump into talking about those famous twins. We'll call it Esau and Jacob for now, and then continue to refer to them as Jacob and Esau going forward. And as we're going to see, as many times it's been said, Genesis is a study of the dysfunctional family. And we're certainly going to see that today. So just a quick review of what we learned about the family dynamic between Isaac, Rebekah, Esau, and Jacob from chapter 25. Well, what did we learn? We learned that animosity is starting to build between Esau and Jacob. And we saw sibling rivalry between Cain and Abel. But in the case of Cain and Abel, we didn't see a situation where we said, let's say Cain was favored by Adam and Eve favored Abel. No, that wasn't the case at all. But in this situation, we've got parents picking favorites, and we're going to see some consequences from that. Isaac indeed prefers Esau. Rebekah prefers Jacob. Esau becomes a mighty hunter, a skilled hunter, able to go out and hunt wild game. Apparently he's a pretty good archer, so all of that's evident. Jacob, the text tells us, is more content to hang around the tents and kind of stay in the home camp. So Rebekah prefers Jacob. It's amazing to me looking back on this. Isaac has many good traits. He's a very peaceful person, but sometimes you can be so peaceful that you don't want to handle a problem. And Isaac has a problem. And this favoritism is going to disrupt his family even further than it already has. Esau sold his birthright to Jacob, and which is fascinating, not to be confused with the blessing, which we'll talk about today, but he sells his birthright, his place as the firstborn. And when chapter 26 wraps up, as we talked about last week, we learn that Esau takes two wives from there in the area close to them versus consulting his parents. And these wives are a tremendous source of frustration for Isaac and Rebekah. So having said that, let's jump into the word in chapter 27. When Isaac was old and his eyes were so weak that he could no longer see, he called for Esau, his older son, and said to him, "My son?" "Here I am," he answered. Isaac said, "I am now an old man and don't know the day of my death. Now then, get your equipment, your quiver and bow, and go out into the open country to hunt some wild game for me. Prepare me the kind of tasty food I like and bring it to me to eat, so that I may give you my blessing before I die." Now Rebekah was listening as Isaac spoke to his son Esau. When Esau left for the open country to hunt game and bring it back, Rebekah said to her son Jacob, "Look, I overheard your father say to your brother Esau, 'Bring me some game and prepare me some tasty food to eat, so that I may give you my blessing in the presence of the Lord before I die.' Now, my son, listen carefully and do what I tell you. Go into the flock and bring me 2 choice young goats so I can prepare some tasty food for your father, just the way he likes it. Then take it to your father to eat, so that he may give you his blessing before he dies. Jacob says to Rebekah, his mother, "But my brother Esau is a hairy man, while I have smooth skin. What if my father touches me? I would appear to be tricking him and would bring down a curse on myself rather than a blessing." His mother said to him, "My son, let the curse fall on me. Just do what I say. Go and get them for me." So he went and got them and brought them to his mother, and she prepared some tasty food, just the way his father liked it. Then Rebekah took some of the best clothes of Esau, her older son, which she had in the house, and put them on her younger son Jacob. She also covered his hands and the smooth part of his neck with goat skins. Then she handed to her son the tasty food and bread she had made. All right, so let's stop and think about a few things. Number one, wow, what a family. Yet this didn't happen overnight, did it? I mean, there are a lot of different things that took place in order for this family to get to this situation. We know that Isaac is 60 years old when his sons are born. We don't know exactly how old the boys are now, but if they're close to their dad in terms of the age when they married, Isaac doesn't marry until he's 40. So let's say Esau is 30 or so when he takes wives. There's a good chance Isaac's 90 to 100 years old. And it's interesting to me that at this point, he gets to the point where he can't even really see before he thinks about doing this blessing for Esau. And I think about things today. And my wife and I always joke about how when we get to a certain age where we still have our wits about us, we're going to sit down with our children and say, "Hey guys, this is what the family looks like from an estate standpoint, so to speak," so that it's all clear and it's all understood. This is something that Isaac in this example is giving us. He's lost use of some of his faculties, right? He can't hear very well. He can't completely distinguish the voice, as we're about to see. He can't see. His sense of touch is going to, and smell is going to be fooled. So I think there's a real good lesson here to try to be out in front of this in your life. But aside from that, okay, let's communicate with our wife. Let's have a relationship where you can share things, right? Here's Rebekah, who clearly favors Jacob, Isaac favoring Esau. And again, we talked about how favoritism is going to build a camp, so that when that happens, all of a sudden you have parents acting in the best interest of the others. Now, Isaac probably was doing what he's supposed to do with the oldest son. Rebekah certainly is starting to put together this ruse, and she is the architect of it. She favors Jacob. She wants to see him benefit from this situation and puts together the master plan. Now, while Jacob is skeptical, he can't help but like the immediate result, right? If he's got the birthright, let's get the blessing and go from there. Now, scholars and all of us to a certain extent can look at this and say, wait a minute. Back when Rebekah was pregnant, what does God tell her in a dream? He tells her that two nations are battling within your womb, and that the older would serve the younger. So maybe it's a foregone conclusion. Does Rebekah ever tell Isaac this? Well, I would think she would, but maybe not. Or if she did, it certainly doesn't seem like Isaac thinks through that. He clearly sees Esau as the person who should have the blessing. And there have been plenty of people who theologically have said, no, Rebekah's acting correctly to put Jacob in the place to be the one who should be blessed, as God has said so? I don't know. I struggle with that simply because I don't think God would use that method, but I know that He takes the outcome and certainly uses it, if that makes sense. I can't condone, if you will, Rebekah being deceitful to her husband and using Jacob to do that to take from Esau, but at the same time, we do understand the outcome. So in general, I step back and say, Isaac, what happened to your family, man? One of the things that I think God calls fathers to do and husbands to do is to be someone who has a vision for your family, not just physically in your needs to provide for them, but to also have a spiritual vision and an emotional vision for your family so that they're healthy in all three ways. And what I think Isaac has done is just kind of step back, and not be as engaged as he should have been to know what was going on. Sadly, we're going to see that in his son Jacob in the chapters to come, who doesn't have two sons, but will have 12, and at least one daughter that we know about. And he just, a lot of times, is emotionally detached from his family. So again, as we talked about last week and we'll continue to talk about, sometimes the sins of the parents or the mothers and the fathers comes home to rest with the sons and the daughters. So at this point, the ruse is on, and so let's see what happens next. Verse 18, he went to his father, Jacob, and said, "My father?" "Yes, my son. Who is it?" See, he stops to ask him. Jacob said to his father, "I am Esau, your firstborn. I have done as you told me. Please sit up and eat some of my game so that you may give me your blessing." Isaac asked his son, "How did you find it so quickly, my son?" "The Lord gave me success," he replied. Then Isaac said to Jacob, "Come near so I can touch you, my son, to know whether you are really my son Esau or not." Jacob went close to his father Isaac, who touched him and said, "The voice is the voice of Jacob, but the hands are the hands of Esau." He did not recognize him, for his hands were hairy like those of his brother Esau, so he proceeded to bless him. "Are you really my son Esau?" he asked. "I am," he replied. Then he said, "My son, bring me some of your game to eat, so that I may give you my blessing." And Jacob brought it to him, and he ate. And he brought some wine, and he drank. Then his father Isaac said to him, "Come here, my son, and kiss me." So he went to him and kissed him, and when Isaac caught the smell of his clothes, he blessed him and said, "Ah, the smell of my son is like the smell of a field that the Lord has blessed. May God give you heaven's dew and earth's richness and abundance of grain and new wine. May nations serve you and peoples bow down to you. Be Lord over your brothers, and may the sons of your mother bow down to you. May those who curse you be cursed, and those who bless you be blessed." So, the deed is done. The blessing has been given to Jacob, and the plan is set in motion. As you think about this, and I wonder as Jacob aged, because we know he lived to be 137 years old, I wonder how often he thought about this and thought about deceiving his father and the consequences of it. And we'll talk some more about that as we go. In verse 30 it says that after Isaac finished blessing him, and Jacob had scarcely left his father's presence, his brother Esau came in from hunting. He too prepared some tasty food and brought it to his father. Then he said to him, "My father, please sit up and eat some of my game so that you may give me your blessing." His father Isaac asked him, "Who are you?" "I'm your son," he said, "your firstborn Esau." Isaac trembled violently and said, "Who was it then that hunted game and brought it to me? I ate it just before you came, and I blessed him. And indeed, he will be blessed." When Esau heard his father's words, he burst out with a loud cry and said to his father, "Bless me too, bless me, my father." But he said, "Your brother came deceitfully and took your blessing." So clearly there was a tremendous amount of anguish on behalf of Esau. And I can't help but think that Isaac didn't feel immediately gut punched, just sick at what had happened. But Isaac does know that the blessing has been given. The blessing is going to be honored by God, and the blessing will occur as Isaac has laid it out. So further, Esau said, "Isn't he rightly named Jacob?" Which we talked about. Figuratively means he deceives. Literally, he grasps the heel. I can't tell you how many times my Georgia granddaddy used to say, "Are you pulling my leg, boy?" And of course, we've all heard that expression in one way or another, and it just means, are you teasing me? Are you kind of deceiving me a bit in one way or the other? "Isn't he rightly named Jacob? This is the second time he has taken advantage of me. He took my birthright, and now he's taking my blessing." Then he looks at his father and asks, "Haven't you reserved any blessing for me?" Isaac answered Esau, "I've made him lord of you, and have made all of his relatives his servants, and I have sustained him with new grain and wine. So what can I possibly do for you, my son?" Esau said to his father, "Do you only have one blessing, my father? Bless me too, my father." Then Esau wept aloud. His father Isaac answered him, "Your dwelling will be away from the earth's richness, away from the dew of heaven above. You will live by the sword, and you will serve your brother. But when you grow restless, you will throw his yoke from your neck." Esau held a grudge, understandably so, against Jacob because of the blessing his father had given him. And he said to himself, "The days of mourning for my father are near. Then I will kill my brother Jacob." And it's interesting to me that the text says he says to himself what was just read. But look at the next sentence. Because somebody knew. When Rebekah was told that her older son Esau had said what Esau had said, she sent for her younger son Jacob and said to him, "Your brother Esau is planning to avenge himself by killing you. Now then, my son, do what I say. Flee at once to my brother Laban in Haran. Stay with him for a while until your brother's fury subsides. When your brother is no longer angry with you and forgets what you did to him, I'll send word for you to come back from there. Why should I lose both of you in one day?" Then Rebekah said to Isaac, "I'm disgusted with living because of these Hittite women. If Jacob takes a wife from among the women of this land, from the Hittite women like these, my life will not be worth living." So at this point, Rebekah, for good purpose, is about to send Jacob to get a wife from the house of Bethuel, among the family of Laban, her brother. But instead of telling Isaac, look, we got a problem. Esau wants to kill Jacob because of what's happened. She says, and rightly so, that she doesn't like the Hittite women, but it's amazing to me what each of them, especially Rebekah, will tell Isaac for her own advantage or for her own point of view versus telling him the whole story. And we'll see what happens next to Jacob after this short break. Okay, so after Jacob is told to go find a wife by his mother, what happens? Well, she tells him specifically to go to her brother Laban in Padan Haran and to look for a wife. Okay? It's funny because we're going to see that Esau seeks to further irritate his parents once he realizes what a big irritation his wives are to them. So he marries some more Hittite wives. And on the way to Laban, Jacob has an absolutely wild dream. So let's jump back into the text. Chapter 28. So Isaac called for Jacob and blessed him. He then commanded him, do not marry a Canaanite woman. Go at once to Padan Haran, to the house of your mother's father Bethuel. Take a wife for yourself there from among the daughters of Laban, your mother's brother. May God Almighty bless you and make you fruitful and increase your numbers until you become a community of peoples. May He give you and your descendants the blessing given to Abraham, so that you may take possession of the land where you now reside as a foreigner, the land God gave to Abraham. Then Isaac sent Jacob on his way, and he went to Padan Haran, to Laban, son of Bethuel the Aramean, the brother of Rebekah, who is the mother of Jacob and Esau. It's interesting to me that the text reminds us of all those relations before we read about the next events. Pressing on. Now, Esau learned that Isaac had blessed Jacob and had sent him to Padan Aram to take a wife from there. And when he blessed him, he commanded him, do not marry a Canaanite woman. And that Jacob had obeyed his father and mother and gone to Padan Aram. Esau then realized how displeasing the Canaanite women were to his father Isaac. So he went to Ishmael and married Mahathalath, the sister of Neobath, the daughter of Ishmael, son of Abraham, in addition to the wives he already had. So, technically not Canaanite, but still not probably the women that Isaac would have preferred. Jacob left Beersheba and set out for Haran. When he reached a certain place, he stopped for the night because the sun had set. Taking one of the stones there, he put it under his head and lay down to sleep. He had a dream in which he saw a stairway resting on the earth, with its top reaching to heaven, and the angels of God were ascending and descending on it. There above it stood the Lord, and he said, I am the Lord, the God of your father Abraham, and the God of Isaac. I will give you and your descendants the land on which you are lying. Your descendants will be like the dust of the earth, and you will spread out to the east and the west and the north and the south. All peoples of the earth will be blessed through you and your offspring. I am with you and will watch over you wherever you go. And I will bring you back to this land, and I will not leave you until I have done what I've promised you. If you ever make it to the campus of Abilene Christian University, they have a sculpture that was erected, I believe, in 2006 that the artist's intent was to replicate this dream from Genesis 28 describing Jacob's dream. And it is a fascinating sculpture. It's, as you look at it in the total setting, it's fantastic in that there are scriptures all over and around the area. There's a baptismal pool there as well, and a phenomenal place to sit, reflect, and spend some quiet time with God. I encourage you to see it if you never have. But in this dream, let's not forget the absolute promise given here. And every so often when I read this, I get a little bit of a chill. Because when you think about this, when God tells him, all peoples on the earth will be blessed through you and your offspring, that was one time for all. And we know that to have come to fruition in our Lord and Savior Jesus Christ. And it wasn't just for the people of that day and that time, but it was for all peoples and all time. That through that family, that crazy, mixed up, dysfunctional family, God was going to bless the entire earth. So we give him the honor and glory for that. Pressing on. When Jacob wakes up, he thought, surely the Lord is in this place, and I was not aware of it. He was afraid and said, how awesome is this place? This is none other than the house of God. This is the gate of heaven. So early the next morning, Jacob took the stone he had placed under his head and set it up as a pillar and poured oil on top of it, and he called that place Bethel, though the city used to be called Luz. And then he made a vow, saying, if God will be with me and watch over me on this journey I'm taking, and will give me food to eat and clothes to wear so that I will return safely to my father's household, then the Lord will be my God, and this stone that I have set up as a pillar will be God's house, and all of that you give me, I will give a tenth. So, in this scene, I really, for the first time, we see kind of an understanding of the seriousness of Jacob's place in the world, so to speak. He seems to be growing up. He seems to be maturing. He seems to be understanding how important it is and will be for him to carry out God's mission for him as he lives. And as we press on into chapter 29, here are some of the things that will happen. First of all, Jacob will arrive at the well. Much like a generation before, a servant arrives on behalf of Abraham and Isaac to look for a wife for Isaac. So he's going to meet Rachel, and she will take him to meet her father, Laban, who's the brother of Rebekah. Now, both of these kids with the father Bethuel seem to really be cut from a common cloth in terms of how they operate, how they, for lack of a better term, how they will misrepresent things or deceive. And it's fascinating to me that as a young man, or certainly before he's married Jacob maybe benefits from Rebekah's schemes, but man, the next 20 years are going to be rough because of Laban's schemes. And it's fascinating to me. I always wonder, what would have happened if they actually lived close enough for Jacob to say, hey, Mom, what's up with your brother here? Why does he do this kind of stuff? We'll save those for future lessons, but it's fascinating to me to think through what that would have been like. And I think the ancient times lend themselves to these situations because even though the distances we could drive in a couple of hours in a car, you certainly wouldn't make that journey often, if at all. And so over the next 20 years that he spends growing a family and living and working for Laban, I don't think we have any record of, nor would we even conceive that Jacob is able to communicate with Rebekah at all. But initially, when he meets with Laban, Laban pronounces Jacob his own flesh and blood. So there's this warm embrace of what's going on, and he's excited that Jacob has made the journey and has been there. It's almost like it's validation of them being able to send Rebekah off, as we saw a few chapters earlier. Laban, I don't know if you remember, we see him coming out to meet Abraham's servant who's there on behalf of Isaac, and he's very much a part of the dialogue around sending Rebekah back with a servant to meet Isaac and become his wife. So I can see Laban, in a very real sense, being glad to see Jacob and know that Rebekah is his mother. And finally, like we said, I think Jacob is starting to mature and really starting to become a servant for God. And in this, we've got a variety of different things to consider as the next several chapters will focus in on Jacob, his growing family, the dynamic between his wives and their handservants as well, right? And his ever frustrating challenges in dealing with his father-in-law and uncle, Laban. So, for today, what are our takeaways? Well, as a parent, I just have to stop for a minute and say we really, really got to guard against favoritism in a very active or proactive way. Let me just read it. As parents, we have to guard against favoritism actively, constantly seeking to encourage and develop each child's unique gifts for the kingdom. Your kids are going to be different. And there may be things where you more closely relate to one kid over another, but you have got to really work to make sure that each child feels your favor. Each child feels honored by the gifts that they have. Each child knows that they've got a place in the kingdom to contribute with the gifts that they've been given. And we've got to develop those. And you as parents have to be united in how you honor those kids and those gifts. I just look at this situation and say, you got daddy's boy and mama's boy, and that just doesn't work well. Wouldn't work well with daughters, wouldn't work well with one son and a daughter. Whatever family dynamic you have, you can't be showing favoritism. You've got to really help cast a vision for each kid, understand their unique gifts, and develop those, and do it together as husband and wife and as parents. The consequences of short-term deceit can often produce long-term problems. And boy, we can see that a lot of different places in our lives. And I know I've suffered on doing some of that to myself as well, and to those who are closest to me. I think about this example. I can't imagine that Rebekah thought when they were going to steal the blessing that she'd never see Jacob again. But that's best we can tell, that's what happened. When he comes back to meet Esau, there's no mention of Rebekah. We know that Isaac was close to death when he left. And while Rebekah's still younger, it's a 20-year stretch. We don't know how old she was, and we don't know if she ever saw Jacob again. But that's the inference we probably have to draw there. In any event, it's 20 years. You know, think about that. So I don't think she thought through never seeing Jacob again as a result of that. Next thing I'd say is, as parents, and especially dads, you can't let problems fester in your family. You got to address them. They won't go away. Usually they get worse. Usually. But the simple fact of the matter is you have to address them, or your family's going to in some way fall apart. And I think we can certainly see this. Now, long term, it's very reassuring and nice that Jacob and Esau reconcile. But, you know, Jacob doesn't close the eyes of his father Isaac when he dies. We're pretty sure, like we just talked about, that he never sees his mother again. And the boys live separately. I mean, we only know of them coming together once, and then ultimately their descendants have many conflicts. And yet, God works through all of this still to save the world. So the older I get, the more I realize there's no way I'm going to be perfect. But the main thing and the most important thing is just to be willing to be a servant for God. Let Him put you to work. Just be willing to be able to be put to work, and let God take care of the rest, because willing servants is what He needs. So for next week, please take time to read Genesis 29 through 30 as we begin to understand the developing family in Haran that will be with Jacob, Leah, Rachel, and the kids. Take care and have a very blessed week. Thank you.